Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Athlete Podcast brought to you by Sports for Champions. I'm delighted to say we are today joined by Liam Drury. Liam is a Team England gymnast. Nice to meet Liam.
Nice to meet you.
Very good. So Liam has kindly signed on to come and visit some schools in the UK throughout the next academic year. So Liam, how did you get into gymnastics?
So I started when I was about 5 or 6 recreationally after doing little tumble top kind of classes when I was little with my mum. And then from 6 went onto the performance pathway in Nottingham and been training there ever since, from just when I was young doing it just because I enjoyed it to now as a much more elite performance based sport.
Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about that tumble tots, as you said, because that's obviously, what age group was that?
Probably preschool kind of age, probably about I'd say 2 to 4, 2 to 5 would be my guess of the kind of age I did it.
What's the sort of, because I always find things that's quite interesting, how much of that at that age is about sort of gymnastics and how much is about just sort of like movement and things?
I guess a lot of it is just natural, like body weight strength, getting yourself over things, under things, climbing things, climbing back down them. So they often set up like circuits and obstacle courses that the kids will do, and I think my mum noticed that I was finding it maybe a bit easier than a lot of the other children who were there. So she just decided to take me to the local gymnastics club and just blossom from there, really.
Yeah. So in terms of your actual sport, we'll talk a little bit about your injury first. So you're injured at the moment, unfortunately. Yeah. How did that happen?
So 2024 Northern European Championships, I'd earned a place in the vault final. And on the first vault in the final, I landed a bit off, twisting a little bit into the ground, injured my 2 ligaments in my knee. So I've had surgeries for those to repair them, and then just going through the rehab process now.
Did you know sort of instantly you'd done something pretty bad?
I've never had that was the first time I've had a proper freak accident, to be honest. So it was, I didn't really know how to react. The medical team were brilliant out in Ireland. Got to me extremely quickly. So yeah, I didn't know instantaneously how bad it was. I just knew that I wasn't in a good way.
Yeah, I think in terms of injuries and things, obviously you can never sort of predict them. This was obviously like your first major injury. How's that been sort of mentally coming back from that? Yeah,
so in the past I've had injuries to my back and my elbow, but it was never attached to any sort of trauma or anything, because they were, both of those, as much as they were big injuries, they were overuse injuries. So there was never, the trauma was doing gymnastics, which there was no specific skill or apparatus it was attached to. So with this one, it's been a lot more difficult because I know that in the future there's going to be challenges mentally doing that skill again, competing in a tense environment again. But knowing I've got a good support network around me, people who have been through similar experiences, it's very reassuring, and just seeing my own progress as well as other people's in the past, but just seeing my day-to-day, month-to-month progress has really helped with my confidence.
Yeah. So you're at around 6 months in now.
Yeah.
So around, obviously you were saying before, as a 12-month injury. How do you feel at the moment? Do you feel like you're on pace? Are you a little bit ahead?
I think probably a little bit of ahead of where I would expect. There was a bit of discrepancy between how many surgeries I'd need and when the major ones would be. But at this point in time, I'm in a good place compared to where I could have been. So day to day, I'm just getting more confident with my knee and how it reacts to certain situations. Just happy to be walking normally again and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of obviously your actual sport, you're more of an all-rounder.
Yeah.
Any reason in particular for being all-round and not specialising?
I just keeping my options open while I'm young. I think I've still got the facilities to be able to focus on my strengths as pieces, but also still work those weaker pieces to incorporate them into an all-around. So it keeps my options open for the future.
Absolutely. Is that something that you'd advise to other young gymnasts? Like, don't specialise in one thing, keep yourself...
Yeah, I think definitely as a junior gymnast and younger than that, it's definitely beneficial to continue doing all around, because there's pieces now and strengths now that I wouldn't have known about as a junior, that now as a senior you start to realise, as just even naturally you don't necessarily realise you're as good as a piece as you are, and if you choose to specialise at such a young age, potentially you miss out what could have been another apparatus.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about the different apparatus, what would you say is your favourite, or the one you're most comfortable?
Favourite to train is probably parallel bars. There's a lot of different skills involved, so really enjoy training that and the process of refining technique on that apparatus. The rings is a good one to train as well, but a lot of it is strength work at this stage, so it can be tough at times, but it's really good to see the improvement, see that progress. My best piece was vault, and I hope for that to continue after I've recovered from my injury. So it's just about getting myself fully back from this injury and moving forward.
As you were saying there about the vault being your favourite, and obviously that was where you suffered the injury, is any part of you a little bit sort of worried to get back out on the vault, or are you just like, freak accident, you can move on?
Yeah, I mean, I know it was a freak accident. There was maybe little factors that played into it, but it was one of those where I know that I will be able to get back now, but at the beginning there was a lot of doubt. I didn't know week to week whether there was doubt all the time, whether that would be feasible mentally and physically, to be honest. But getting to a point now where with each next bit of progress in my recovery, extra bit of confidence, it's like, okay, well, this is a step closer to where I'd need to be, and knowing that I'll put things in place to make sure that my legs are as strong as they can be, just to try and prevent things from like that from happening again.
Yeah, I think you look at other sports, and obviously gymnastics is they probably have elements of this as well, but it's getting to a big part now is injury prevention, and less so much about treating injuries but trying to, like I said, prevent them. Is that much that you previously done, or is it something that now, because you've had this injury, you might take up a little bit more as you move on? Or
I think I was doing, after injuries with my back and my elbow, there's definitely management strategies in place, strengthening muscles around those areas, making sure that they're not the thing that the body's relying on to function correctly. So I think before it was kind of a natural management strategy that came with being able to do the sport again, but this time around I think there's going to be a lot more focused management strategy in the future, just making sure maintaining strength in my legs, keeping myself as safe as possible. So yeah, I think it would definitely put a sway on that and make it a more bigger priority for my training.
Absolutely. So in terms of your training, you touched upon it there. Take us through sort of a usual week in a normal training week for you.
So I train Monday through to Saturday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday tend to be my lighter days. Train from 1 o'clock pretty much every day. So always in the afternoon. Monday we do preparation work, so a bit more basic, preparing ourselves for the rest of the week. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday tend to be our heavy days, so we'll either do potentially 2 sessions in the gym and then maybe also a weight session afterwards. So those days can be from 1 o'clock till 9. There's breaks included in that, but yeah, they tend to be the heavier days. In competition preparation, they're the days where volume of routines and volume of training will be a lot higher, and it also, doing 2 gymnastic sessions also allows for you to either split up routines or have one session focusing on routines and one session focusing on improving the technique of things and things like that. So yeah, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday are much heavier days. Wednesday and Friday are recovery days to correct things from routines, focus on technique for things, allowing the body to recover but maintain training and carry on improving.
Yeah. So how much of your training time is split? Well, I suppose one thing that's sort of interesting is, as a gymnast, once you get to seniors and things, what's the split time between sort of learning a new skill, or are you doing any of that, or is it just I'm trying to clear up what I already know?
I think there's a lot of the fundamentals from being a junior and younger than that stick with you. As you become a senior, changing technique and things becomes harder. I'm fortunate because I'm still quite young, so I'm still able to do that. But as you progress, the more repetition you've done of doing it one way, the harder it is to flip it the other. So it's just a case, still definitely learning new skills at this stage, trying to refine them and make sure that the skills that I'm planning on keeping for the long term are mastered as well as I can, and then focusing on which skills are going to be the most advantageous to put in my routines from both an execution perspective, difficulty, risk, things like that. So it's just a case of being a bit more smart as a senior, focusing your time on the things that will be used rather than almost not playing around in a bad way, but having a go at different things as a junior.
Yeah. So when you were a junior, obviously, and you're working alongside, you're doing your gymnastics alongside your schoolwork and things. How did you find that? Because I know some people sort of struggle with balancing the two.
I actually really enjoyed balancing the two, to be fair. It gave me an escape from both. Don't get me wrong, it was tough at times, especially when exams are around and things, but it kept me focused. I'm the kind of person who doesn't like to just be sat around, so getting up in the morning, going out for 6 hours at school, getting in, having a pretty quick turnaround and getting to the gym for the rest of the night. As much as it was difficult and you've got to obviously factor in sleep and things, I did manage to do it, and it meant that physically I got a rest in school, and to an extent mentally I got a rest when I was at gym. But at least, even if not a rest, it was an escape.
Yes.
So it meant that I was able to balance those really well, and I could enjoy them for what they were, separately and together.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think there's a lot of times where if one starts to push over onto the other, that's where you start to struggle. But obviously, if you were viewing it as an escape from one is doing the other, I think that's sort of the perfect balance, really. So obviously, your sport now. You, like I said, we're currently injured, unfortunately. What's the next 12 months look like for you? So in terms of your recovery, and what are we looking at after that?
So I don't know the exact timelines of my recovery, but the hope, the main aim is the national competitions at the start of next year, the English Championships, British Championships. Getting myself as fit as I can for them, new skills that I'm able to do, focusing on those strengths like I said before. Using these next probably 6 months where a lot of the work with my legs is going to be rehab based rather than training based, to focus on those other pieces and build them up as much as I can. It gives me, as much as an injury is bad, it gives me a good opportunity to work on other things as well. So make the most out of a bad situation. Try and just get myself in as good a shape as possible, ready for next year.
So life outside of gymnastics, what kind of hobbies would you do to sort of wind down?
Gymnastics is obviously indoors a lot, so getting outside, socialising with friends who are both in the sport and out of as an escape, either debriefing with friends who are in the sport, talking about gymnastics, or just generally socialising with friends, getting out of the house, travelling, seeing new places, experiencing new things, just because a lot of the time I'm in the same environment, just working hard, so like to be outdoors when I'm not.
Yeah. How important is that for you to have them people who, in the nicest way possible, don't care about gymnastics and they're not bothered about your job or what you do?
I think as much as at time, if you try to have a conversation with them about gymnastics, it may be hard to get across, but 99% of the time it's a complete escape. I'm not a different person, but I am me. I'm not gymnast.
Yeah.
So it's nice to just, and a lot of people who don't know the sport, I can just be myself and enjoy spending time with them rather than it being gymnastics. So it's nice to have that escape from the sport, and a lot of my friends are now at uni, so I don't necessarily see them frequently, but when they're back, we always make the most of it to see each other and just catch up and stuff.
Yeah. Was university ever something that you thought about going down, or were you always just solely focused on gymnastics?
So up until probably 16, I was thinking I'd go to uni. Had different thoughts on what, had thoughts about doing things sport related and not sport related. Obviously sport related things due to gymnastics my whole life, but then equally knowing how I balanced sport related things in terms of gymnastics and something completely separate, I considered them as well. But then when I started my A-levels, I started to maybe veer away from that idea in terms of training full time and then supporting myself financially on the side as a alternative option. And then I'm not closed off to uni at all. In the future, if there's a job, say physio or something different that I'd like to pursue, then definitely go down that route. But for now, while I think for me there's no point in me going to university unless it's because I want to achieve something from it. I don't really want to go just for the sake of it, so that I can prioritise training.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched upon there about funding and things, and obviously you've today partnered with Sports for Champions, and obviously that's something that we're going to help out with. You're going to be visiting schools, and obviously we're going to help you out financially as well. How much of your sort of career is sort of dictated around funding, and does that ever affect your training or competitions that you can go to and things like that?
I think I'm in a very lucky position where my parents are very supportive and help fund my training and my nutrition outside of the gym. So whether it's supplements and protein powders that I start taking as I've got a bit older, things like that, they're extremely supportive and make sure that I'm facilitated in the best way possible. So I've never really been limited from a training perspective financially, thanks to the help from them. But just simple things like outside the gym, like insuring a car, things like that, having that extra money to save towards eventually moving out, and things like that, where I'm having to start looking into those ideas now. And I've been coaching in the past. I wasn't while I was injured, so that was always really beneficial to help me. Yeah, financially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously it's something that unfortunately more and more athletes are struggling with is the funding element, because we've found the governing bodies of certain sports have obviously massively increased their funding, other they've massively decreased it, and some they've taken their funding completely away. And I think even ones where it comes to sports that will be going to the Olympics, unless you're on that, unless you're predicted as a medal, they're not really offering that great funding that they may be used to, especially in the build up to like London 2012. So in terms of the Olympics, I think obviously that's for someone like you, it's your end goal, and that's the centerpiece of a career. What are your first sort of Olympic memories?
Obviously London 2012 was huge. An Olympic Games, I would have been 7 or 8 at the time, so just about on the brink of me being able to properly remember it. Sam Oldham, who used to train at Notts, he obviously competed and medalled as part of the team, so a huge inspiration along with every other member of that team. So being able to see things like that and gymnastics, especially men's gymnastics, take off from there in the UK, it was a huge inspiration. We're very lucky that we've got those role models, because when those guys were younger, they didn't necessarily have the same system above them to aspire to. And then I remember watching Rio 2016, watching Max's pommel and floor, as well as Niall's high bar. Just huge inspiration as a younger gymnast, watching the guys at the top in your country who you'd see at a domestic competition go and do that at an Olympic Games in Brazil. It was just incredible. And then obviously the 2 Olympics that have followed, it's just hugely inspiring to watch. See gymnasts from all over the world, and even watching other sports and people at the top of their sport compete and fight for being a champion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you go back and look, you made a good point there about the male gymnasts back in London 2012, who they're probably growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they didn't have really that sort of role model. And I guess their pathway into gymnastics would be a bit more difficult, because I mean, even for someone like me, I'm a little bit older than you. I don't think there was any opportunity for someone my age to, especially a boy, to go down gymnastics, and that feels like it's changed more recently. Obviously you mentioned about you were going into was it tumble tops? Yeah, you were going into that as well. Just talk about how is there sort of still a stigma around male gymnastics, or is that something that now, since you've seen all these fantastic Team GB, especially Team GB athletes do it, is that something that's now sort of moved on?
I think I never experienced much, really. There was maybe the odd comment, or you see something online, but there's always going to be that. There's that in football. Not necessarily the same stigma, but there's stigmas around it. I think in general people are able to appreciate how difficult it is, and you often hear people who don't really know anything about gymnastics, especially like when the Commonwealths was in Birmingham. Oh, we went to watch the gymnastics. Oh, it was really entertaining, things like that. So I think nowadays people are appreciating how difficult the sport is, and the stigma isn't that prominent from my perspective, at least.
Yeah, brilliant. So obviously, sort of final few questions now, I guess. The 5-year plan got to be. I'm gonna do that again. So 5-year plan. Obviously, recover from your injury. That's fingers crossed that's going to be taken care of. Where do you want to be, sort of, if we were to reconvene into like 2030?
I think for me, obviously, you can have objective aims: Olympics, major championships, national squads, things like that. But the general thing is, I want my gymnastics to be as best it possibly can be. And after recovering from quite a few injuries in the recent years, being able to compete at a high level consistently is the ultimate goal. I think if my gymnastics gets as best as it possibly can be, then I'll be where I'd like to be. So it's just a case of focusing on what I can do to get myself in the right position and carry on training hard and being healthy and doing the sport.
Yeah. And I guess so. I hate it when I have my hands up. So final question: if you were to, you going to visit one of the schools with sports for champions, and a little boy or a little girl comes up to you and says, I want to be like you, I want to get into gymnastics, what would be your advice for them?
I think going to the local gymnastics club, whichever's closest to you, or the best one near you, whichever one you can accommodate. Start trying it out, seeing how you get on with it, and even if it's recreational, just keep enjoying the sport, doing the best that you can do. You might not be the next Olympian, but you might get further than you'd expect, and if you keep on working hard, you can make a lot of progress just through that. So yeah, work hard, enjoy the sport, and carry on training.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a great place to end it. So thank you very much for today, Liam. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you for watching the Athlete Podcast, brought to you by Sports for Champions.